Welcome back to the Big Book Podcast for November 13th or 14th, whenever we release this. I am Automaton 2000, and before I introduce our panel of University of Regina graduates, a quick reminder that the video version of this podcast with deleted scenes and gag reel is available exclusively to our Big Book Plus subscribers. Now with me as always, and by always I mean 2 weeks in a row, is brown hole scientist and Big Book shareholder Dan Javin. Dan, will the Miami Dolphins ever beat a team above 500?
I think the Dolphins should stay in Cetacean Ops where they belong. Doing great. Thanks for having me again, representing the cab fleet. Glad to be here.
Good point. I don't know anything about football either, so let's move on. With us, as well as the man who would also commit genocide, just to stick it to Michael Eddington, Jenos Sedanian. Jenos, did you get that pumpkin I sent you last week?
I haven't. Did you send it to New Hampshire or Old Hampshire?
New Hampshire? Lake Winnipesaukee is actually, I think, where I sent it, so...
I don't know where that is, but it's here somewhere.
Also joining us this week, the man who used Continuum Missions to put 7 generations of WRG grandchildren through college, Frank. Frank, some people say your voyage from last week is still running. Can you confirm?
No, it crashed and broke, much like everything else in the game. Thank you.
Well, you know, we try to keep a little light and breezy and not dwell on the repeated mistakes of WRG. But we have to talk about the elephant in the room this week, Continuum Missions. Frank, a.k.a. Daddy Warbucks, you certainly have thoroughly explored the feature. Why don't you start us off? Give your general impressions on Continuum Missions.
I mean, when you peel the layers back, the venerable words of the immortal stars and gutters ring true. Who is this for? It has, on paper, some great ideas, maybe not so much in execution so far. You can make a crew stronger, which is fantastic, even though it's only for 7 days. And which crew do you choose? Well, you can't choose your favorite crew unless your favorite crew are the strongest in the game, because you need the strongest in the game to advance.
We've certainly seen some pretty massive scores. I think this week as we record, there's a 3,800 engineering node needed to crit that. And so that kind of limits the pool of crew that you can use. Dan, what are some of the who are some of the standouts for you? I mean, besides the obvious big base one skillers, are there any diamonds in the rough we should be looking for?
Oh yeah, anybody that can equip there's legendary equipment that key to certain traits, and so we've seen some fantastic results from any of the high-level Cisco Voyagers that have the Bajoran trait that can equip the Orb of Prophecy and Change. And also, I've gotten good use out of my brutal Klingons. My MVP for security nodes has been Koloth, the Dahar Master.
Yeah, no, I'm not too worried about trying to keep this to 3 minutes like some of our other stuff. So I will shout out some names for the Bajorans: top Voyagers with a dip primary, Colonel Kira Nerys, Cisco the Emissary, Varani, all good names. And then for the brutal Klingons, you have a couple crew who, with equipment, will be great Voyagers: Mukbar Worf, Handler Worf, Klingon West. My personal favorite has been Dahar Master Koloth. He gets that unique equipment. I think he has 8 different, either 45 or 65% crit gauntlets. So with that equipment, he's good in multiple areas. Jenos, you've been with, out of the 3 folks here tonight, you've been with the Big Book the longest. So let's go big picture here. How does this change your crew acquisition, your site priority? I mean, are you putting sites on crew you normally wouldn't for Continuum Missions, or are you not necessarily seeing the profitability quite yet?
Yeah, so I've seen this mostly on an alt that I dusted off just to kind of fiddle around with Continuum Missions. So I looked at it and I saw I had quite a few 4 out of 5s from old, giveaways and objective events and megas. So I had some sites and I threw them on some of the bigger base crew that I had, just so I could get through some of the missions. So I'm thinking that we're going to see players prioritize big base crew and potentially ones that can utilize that unique equipment.
Yeah, it's certainly worth noting for unique equipment, it's kind of a threefold plus. For one, they're slightly cheaper than your other gold equipment. I think by 1 material each. They give more stats than gold equipment, 300 on the top end more than the gold ones. And you can actually stack 4 of the same skill that way. With crew that don't have the trait match equipment, you can make 2 gold items for the same skill, and then a third one, which is, I think, 2-star uncommon. And even with that, this week, people have been having trouble with some of those really high nodes. So for security and diplomacy, especially, if you can get that unique equipment, it puts you a step ahead.
Now remember, Otto, it's called qubits.
Yeah,
Qubits are the materials.
Look, they don't pay me enough to keep all this terminology straight. Frank, you've been running a lot of voyages in Gauntlet. How is the I guess we'll call it profitability? Is it worth it in those areas, or is that just kind of a tack on, a nice thing to have?
Well, it depends probably on where your game is, what kind of game you play. For in-game whales, I guess that I can speak for, I thought it was pretty neat to run a, quote, natural 18-hour voyage, as natural as Mark McGuire on steroids, but it's still, with no tokens needed. That was cool. You get more chances at the special dilemmas that can give you those key gold crew that you're after, and after a year of those being out and me never getting one, I did finally get one on a heavily steroided voyage. So I'm okay with it. Gauntlet, I tried one, and no one could beat my, my Locutus or my whoever I took, Red Angel, I don't even remember. And I would leave Gauntlet alone for 12 hours and come back, and I had lost no trophies, which means everybody just refreshed past me.
Yeah, I like that term, steroided voyages. If we can make that stick somehow without offending a certain contingents, I think that'd be great. Now, Dan, we've kind of gone back and forth on this for a long time. New players get a giveaway crew. They get a mega crew, they get a objective event crew, and they get 4 stars on them. And the question is always, do I add that last star? Common sense or common knowledge for years has been, well, it adds more stats than going from star 1 to 2. But, we're getting honor and citations a lot more frequently these days, especially with fleet boss battles. Is it worth throwing that last star on crew who may even be middling or not very good, just to get a crew who can start clearing these continuum missions?
If you're just looking to clear normal, I'm not sure that the value is really there. With only merits as the ultimate prize for clearing all normal, I probably would save my gold citation for something that's going to get me a lot larger rewards, a great Voyager. Great, just something that's going to really pay some dividends. The thing to consider is if you have a prayer of completing the elite level, the second level of all continuing missions, with that gold that you're considering setting up, there's a real juicy drop. You get those 250 quantum if you can 100% those elite missions. So at the start of each week, if you still have that citation in your pocket, and don't rush to dump it on there, but have a good reason. And if you find that crew is really going to make or break and make the difference to completing that final node on one of those middle level missions, I think it could be worth it, because not only do you have an immediate reason to use it, but especially for newer players, getting that first 5-star gold really does make a big difference. You do want to make sure that you're saving it for the right crew, though. If you just have we've had we'll talk later on about mega recurring legendaries, and we'll take a little bit of a retrospective on some from the past. Some are worth it, some really just won't ever work for you. So keep an eye on the big book and watch those numbers.
So save that very special moment for the right person is what you're saying. I understand completely, Dan. I've come up against it once or twice in my life. Let me throw the Jerry Springer final thought to whoever wants it. Is there anything else worth mentioning here with Continuum Missions, or do we kind of have to wait and see on that?
I can speak to that. So part of the Continuum Missions is budgeting out your equipment and deciding when the right time to complete Epic is. Complete that last third tier for the dilithium. I think the numbers work out if you get a good roll of missions and you can complete them without having to quadruple equip multiple crew, that you can probably come out with a profit in terms of the qubits, the components that you drop versus what you need to put into actually 100% everything. But that's going to vary from week to week. It's random. The powers that be at TPG and their algorithm are going to generate and pull these nodes, and we're not sure what's going to be the real difficult one to beat. And if I have to take 3 different crew, put 4 different equipment on them, I may wind up being at a deficit, and that may not be worth it for me that week.
Yeah, calling the algorithm might be generous, because we've had nodes this last week that were lower in Epic than they were in Elite. So I think they're also still trying to iron that out.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it shakes out with just how many qubits you have after a long period of time. to see if you actually can have extras to use your crew that you're not running through the missions in different game modes. Now, granted, Gauntlet doesn't matter since you can use them in Gauntlet and other things, but what if you want to use them in voyages or events? Still more to come on that after we go through a few more weekly refreshes of this.
Yeah, I think we'd all try to like to grab value, a little bit of extra value by using our Voyagers or Gauntlet crew. Sometimes that's just not possible if the balance is going to be as we've seen so far. So, again, we did kind of gloss past them, but Captain Tribble in the Honor Hall, and Demo Man Scotty in Fleet Boss Battles, and then Bones from Crew Retrieval, 1-star wonders who can clear the node. It's going to be exceptionally difficult to try to use a crew to clear 2 nodes on Epic, so you might kind of need to reallocate your resources that way. All right, let's move on to something far more fantastic and surprising and wonderful and rapturous. Jae Hwang, the character from that show with the guy about the thing, Command Dip. Sorry about that. Now, since I'm the host here, I'm going to fob him off on one of you. Who wants to talk about this denim disaster?
I'll do it. As a super rare crew, he's a viable Voyager for the early game. He's got an okay skill set in order. At least he's not Command Dip suck. He comes in a faction event, so you're only going to get 3 copies if you get through 130,000 VP. His event chances aren't super great. He's picked up the Desperate Mega and a Thief event. Other than that, pretty much nothing. And obviously, you're not going to get any variants of this one-off crew. And he's got a good trait list. 3 collections now, 2 more viable ones. So that's well above average, and that's pretty much what an elderly player would want in a super rare crew. Where he's interesting for just about anybody is his ship ability. So you get 200% instant damage with an accuracy boost to 7 at 6 seconds. So it's really quick activation. It's good for early game, good for Captain Arena. There's no limit, there's no trigger. So that's pretty good as far as I'm concerned.
I think you have a little bit of whatever you're fidgeting with is coming through a little bit sound-wise, I think, Jenos, when you're...
I'm not touching anything, sorry.
Oh, then...
Maybe it's the mic on your...
Yeah, might be the mic kind of rubbing against the...
Oh, okay, let me...
It's not bad, but...
Take it off, buddy.
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, you want me to redo it?
No, I think that was fine.
But just to be safe, take off the other shirt too.
Y'all don't want to see that.
Now, I think I will leave that in, actually. I'm not going to edit that out because that's fantastic. Before I throw it to Dan, the Fleet Boss Battles, man, Frank, I've seen you in a lot of denim. So is Jae Hwang rocking it here, or can he do better?
I mean, to me, this looks like a Taylor Swift Eras outfit, but if I walked into a bar and my bartender was dressed like Levi's just threw up on him, I would probably order 3 drinks, because that tells me that this dude's either ready to paint my house or he's a great bartender.
All right, is he great anywhere else? Dan, talk a little bit about the ship stuff, and then let's kind of segue into objective events, because when talking about him before hitting record, he did bring up a few ideas there.
Yeah, are we still talking about this guy? I don't even remember him. Yeah. By the way, how would Stewie Griffin pronounce his name? Would it be
Hwang.
Cool Hwang or Cool Wang? So I a little bit more about the traits. I do love his distribution of traits. It's actually gonna, when he rotates into the portal, it's gonna be valuable for Fleet Boss Battles. So we touched briefly on the ship battle. So he's got unlimited 200% damage. It's not the rarest ability, but he's really quick. So every 16 seconds he gets to fire that off. So particularly at the middle level of your arena battles, is it the captain? Is it the commander level? The middle level?
Captain. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you need to have decent purples on your ship, then he's your man. And it's actually becoming relevant because of the new OEs coming up. We've got a new objective event that you need to compete at all 3 levels of arena in order to maximize your wins and get those drops. And so he actually has a little bit of relevance coming up very, very shortly, and every so often when this objective event comes back around again.
Yeah, we've kind of had a whole mess of objective event changes. One of the recent ones is giving beholds instead of citations. So crew like this, so you get in a faction event, who you may have wanted to cite, maybe now you're a little more choosy. And then again, they also gave us a Immortalized 3 crew objective event, which when we talked about that on Timeline's Talks, got a lot of feedback that is kind of a steep price to pay. So maybe you're hanging on to the sites you do have until that one comes around, or maybe they never come around because WRG likes to do a little bit of market testing. Frank, you have drank with many WRG employees, so if you rub your crystal balls for us, what do you think we can expect to see in the future with objective events?
I think they're going to try and make more complicated objective events. They've obviously gone outside the box with what they've been comfortable with in the past. They listen to feedback from a lot of players with a lot of different backgrounds and game styles that scream and cry that whatever the higher end players or the whales are able to do, it's not fair to them. So they do and try and make at least part of the objective events easily accessible to anyone with an account over level 30. So I would honestly see more of those with the occasional sprinkling of a 5 pip difficulty, once every 2 months, and those are not even that difficult.
So you're saying we might see a 5-star great dad Jae Hwang come back in the future as an objective reward?
I think a Timeline's original assimilated Jae Hwang, or Cool Wang, as he's been dubbed.
All right, on to another really exciting crew. And I don't mean that sarcastically this time, because the Spaceballs we ain't found guy is back with a vengeance. Although vengeance might be a little strong. Command dip sec for the skill set, so automatically not going to be a great Voyager. And unsurprisingly, not a Tuvok variant, even though he happens to look like a sort of buff teenage version of Tim Russ. I don't know what's going on with the art there. Dan, outside of the ship ability, which we'll talk about in a second, is there anything else to really love about this purple that comes out of a pack?
I think Devor is the only individual in the Star Trek multiverse universe that's ever actually been assaulted by a saddle. I think that's about as much.
That's already baked into his tier rating, so we don't have to worry about that.
Good. So noteworthy there. That's about it. That's only one collection. You had to buy into the pack with dilithium or cash to get this guy. So most players that are not invested in the game won't be seeing this for quite some time until he enters the portal. And really, there's not much reason to be with only the one collection to even go out of your way for this guy in the first place.
So as far as his ship ability, he has a 350% instant damage at 6 seconds. He does have a position trigger, just like Lenore Caridian from a few months ago. Same thing with Travis Mayweather from even just a couple weeks ago. So no limit though, 45% uptime. He comes on faster than Abducted Travis, but Travis does have a little bit more uptime. Probably a little bit of an upgrade over Battle with Mariner, who a lot of players have. Is it interesting enough to go into a pack for? Probably not, but something interesting if you don't have any of those other purples and you want to improve your ship battles.
Now, we do aim to serve all sorts of players at all sorts of levels here at the Big Book. And so, Frank, speaking for the swaths of beautiful, very wealthy people who play this game, I'm guessing a purple with one collection isn't exactly, you're not really breaking the bank for, but I do know that you happen to have Frank 2, Frank 3, Frank 4, and Infinite Frank alternate accounts. What does this crew look like to you, both as an endgame exuberant spender and as someone who has a lot of alts who might be able to use them?
In Frank Prime's world, the only reason you would go for this is if you're trying to meticulously collect all crew. Otherwise, this is a complete pass. For other accounts, I can maybe see the value in having the third Tuvok, not Vok, in-game wearing brown to confuse with Mirror and Marquis. But ship battles or ship positioning aside, one collection, a handful in the future, you probably wait till Portal.
All right, that's scintillating Murderer's Row of purples behind us now. Let's go to another place where we love to collect our purples in Mega Recap packs. Now, by the time you're listening to this, the Desperate Mega pack will have elapsed. But so let's go ahead and do a top-down view of the 390 dilithium for a premium pack. How do you guys approach it? Is there a sweet spot? Are you trying to just throw a wide net, collect all crew? Do you stop when you have 5 copies of one of them? Are you trying to finish a recurring mega, or how do you generally approach that?
So when I first was toying around with the idea of getting my mega recaps, they were pretty highly recommended as a decent investment. Now, where that information came from was probably Reddit or the Discord, so can't speak to the individual or the veracity of that, but it served me pretty well early on. I had amassed a good amount of dilithium from the offer wall, rest in peace. Hopefully we'll have our new version soon. So I went pretty big. I think I went in during the Lieutenant Sahil mega. And my goal there was to complete him, get his 5th star, and then there were a few other good crew. Ancient Humanoid came out then. There was some decent crew that really have lasted a long time in terms of their voyage power, so it felt like a pretty safe way to dip in. I had gotten copies of each of those, at least one, so I was building off of something, wasn't flooding my inventory, my crew roster with a whole bunch of new gold junk that wasn't going to get finished. I went in pretty heavy for a few dozens of thousands of dilithium, and it rewarded me for a good long time. I actually had a duplicate of Sahil. I don't recommend duping any command sec crew at this point, but at the time, both of them flew for me for quite some time. Looking back, I certainly could have spent that dill a little more wisely, but for the power jump it gave me at that time, it made the game really fun. It was a quantum leap for a while, and that's kind of how I spent it in the day. Frank, what's your experience with mega recaps?
It honestly depends on the mega. If I'm feeling apathetic during the mega, I might not play very much at all, and I will rely on the packs to fill in the stars that I need. Because for 390 dilithium a pull, it's still a great value. And a long time ago, much like yourself, getting information from other places and without a lot of evolution in the game, mega recap packs were the cheapest source of honor in the game. 390 dilithium, you got a premium pull, and that was fantastic. Now there's a lot of avenues of earning honor, fleet boss battles and others, so it's not really that important. This particular last mega, and a lot of megas that have come before it, there's only one faction event. In the other 3 events you can earn a 4/4 copy of the new purple. So that does help a little bit. The recurring gold lawn was really good. So if you wanted a 5th star, it's a great place to get it. If you decided to dupe, there's a great place to get one. Some of the golds were okay. They weren't the world beaters that we've seen before, but they were really cool crew from a fun event like Brain Drain, Crusher, Riker. Machine Man Paris, but still good crew, and I still say mega recap packs are worth it.
Yeah, I think sometimes the pull of these packs, no pun intended, comes from how good the mega crew are. So we hit on a few of them in episode 1. Didn't get to all of them. This sort of middling. I don't see really any all-star that came out of this. Probably La'an, the recurring, is going to be your best bet. But personally, back when we had Spocktober and all of Spock's romantic TOS bombshell interests, I happened to shell out a little bit extra for that one, and not necessarily because 2 skill to pring was going to rock my voyages. So obviously you have to take that sort of personal element into account. It can also be a little bit of a money pit. I mean, if you're not the kind of player who can make an event run and try to get 4 copies in top 30, which by definition is going to be most of the players in the game, and you're sitting on a lot of 1/5s, and you're trying to finish a gold that way, it might take you a lot of pulls. So be kind of prudent in that, and maybe even budget ahead of time so you don't end up regretting it later on.
Yeah, this particular mega, and a lot since maybe about a year and a half ago, they started throwing another existing legendary into sometimes the final event. So right now, even instead of having 5 legendaries available, now there are 6. So you got to control Leland in there. So it's even harder to finish any one given legendary using these mega pulls. I generally will pull until the first legendary is fully fused, unless I'm real low on dilithium. So in this case, I think I ended up with a copy of Crusher and Riker, and then on like my 8th pull, I got Lon, and I'm like, I'm done, because I'm not gonna spend citations on duping Lon, and I don't want a 1 out of 5 that's gonna sit there forever. So that's where I stopped. 8 packs, 8 tidy packs, and I was done. But it could have taken much longer. I could have gotten more legendaries, but it just worked out like that. RNG gonna RNG.
The big takeaway I think a lot of people do forget is that whenever you approach these packs during a mega, keep in the back of your mind, it's going to be at best 1 year before you see this crew in Portal ever again. So if you don't want to go for them right then, just be fine with them taking up space on your roster as is, or use a site, or airlock them. Really up to you. You don't have to collect them all. Trust me.
Good point. The final thing I'll say too is there's also a real dip your toe in the water approach to just finishing whatever faction only purples you may have had sitting around. Those come real easy. It's the most frequent drop that you'll get a purple drop from those things, and sometimes you can finish it in just a single pack, save the site. It looks like sites are going to be, purple sites specifically, are going to be a lot more scarce going forward, since the new objective events we've seen have either drop beholds or other prizes. So I think that I'm holding on to my purple sites a little more jealously, and I may be taking the mega recap approach to finish my purples.
Yeah, so sort of a comparison to buying daily quantum. That costs about 1,200 dilithium if you're buying it every day to get enough quantum to retrieve one crew. On the other hand, that's about 3 packs from the mega recap, so it's probably not quite as good of a hit rate on golds, but you get the extra honor, and it's a little more targeted than some other packs. So not terrible value all around. For newer players, I'm probably going to suggest that you target a crew, because adding stars early on is going to get you a lot further than having a lot of 1-5s and 2-5s sitting around on your roster.
Of course, the equation flips completely if they ever do pre-caps again, but I think that's probably never happening again.
Well, go ahead, Jenos, and elaborate on that, because maybe not everyone was there for what we're calling pre-caps.
Yeah, so just once, and I think it was earlier this year, and it was the Trill mega event, right, guys? They added every single crew to the game in preparation for the mega event, as opposed to doing it week by week, and they did the recap packs, but they did it before the mega, so hence pre-cap packs, coined by Jenos Sedanian, thank you. But it was the full 600. Yes, thank you. But it was 650 dil, so it was not a discount because you were early adopting these crew. So it also had the added maybe negative impact to WRG is that people would take the events off if they got the crew. And I think, if I'm not remembering incorrectly, someone on this podcast right now might have participated very heavily in precaps and then didn't do any eventing at all. And I think that was definitely Dan, someone?
Who could it be? I will say that I did in all 4 of the Trill events of the Trill Mega. I placed exactly where I am right now in the current event. Dead last place. Tied with Danjavan, by the way.
Yeah.
And I didn't miss it a bit, because for that one moment I said, hey, I get 4 weeks off. That's really cool. And then I realized, oh my God, that was a money sink versus the time that you have to put in to an event just to get a 1-5. And it was really dumb. And I said, I don't think I ever want to see this again.
This is such a degenerate collection of players. Don't play the game, folks. Just buy with dilithium and then airlock them after. It's really leveling the crew. That's the experience and part of the journey that you want in timelines, not the crew themselves.
Yeah, talk about the first to max players, the chaos that was when the precaps dropped and everybody was scrambling. All of a sudden you have 8 simultaneous crew to first to max.
So moving away from WRG greed onto Ferengi greed with People Person Quark, a crew who nobody knew where he came from at first glance, which is not exactly how you want to do business if you're trying to sell cards, but he is from that famous root beer Insidious, just like the Federation conversation with Garrick. He looks like he should be wearing Adidas pants under that because of the squatting. Yes, I can make that joke. I wrote his note. I can steal it if I want. Kind of a boring crew statistically, though. Command dip, whatever. You've heard that a lot before. No elite power anywhere, but certainly some decent offerings between Voyage, Event, and Collections, which may have not bloomed yet.
So yeah, I like this guy's dip primary. It's pretty strong. I think he deserves the tier he's got right now. He's debuting at tier 4. He can voyage free for a while. He's also really good. He's the number 1 Quark for a lot of different applications here. His skill set, I think, is unique for the Quark. He has crafty and communicator. I guess as far as fleet boss battles go, being the only Ferengi with those traits means that the way that nodes are currently generated, it's going to be a while till he's really essential. But something to keep an eye out for is his uniqueness there. Also, some pretty good collections to start off with.
The thing I find most interesting is in the 8 years almost of this game, and anyone who has ever watched 2 seconds of Star Trek knows Quark is the variable epitome of crafty, yet this is the very first Quark crew we have with the crafty trait. If you don't count Herbert Rossoff, which, the game only gives you that crew every 3 weeks because he's in an event or in a campaign or something.
I have so many gold Herbert Rossoff donuts in my inventory. I look like
Yes.
Homer Simpson at this point. So,
but to echo what Dan said, I mean, he's a solid enough crew. He's probably, arguably, the best Quark in the game right now. He won't have his own fleet boss battle triplet, but he will match up with some others. He will be a good crew for voyages for pretty much any roster, because an in-game whale or a newer player could find a use for the skill set with the trait matches on voyages. Not essential to have, but nice to have, and from a good scene, looking like he's dropping the hottest mixtape of 1996.
Yeah, I mean, talking Voyagers, even though he does have a boring skill set, command dip suck, it's pretty strong. He's in the top 4 for that skill set. Let's look at what his comps are. We've got Ferrani, who we've mentioned before. He was an Uber campaign, so if you're a VIP 0 or a low spender, you just skip that campaign, you don't have him. You've got Admiral Pike, who was released as part of that Elusive Treasures snafu, so if you didn't throw any money at that, you don't have him. And another comp is Doopler Emissary, who was so wonderfully voiced by Richard Kind. And Doopler Emissary has stood pretty tall from his mega event 13, 14 months ago. So if you're still using Doopler Emissary at this point, there's a good chance that you would use People Person Quark because they don't intersect really with their antimatter traits. What's nice is it is nice to see another good Ferengi Voyager, because that antimatter seat is pretty hard to fill. You've got Krem, you might have Audred Quark, and you've got this People Person Quark that might fill it, or you're reaching pretty down there for maybe like a Stranded Quark, something like that, or Runt FCA.
all right, Jenos, before you ruthlessly steal another one of my segues, one thing that we want to do on the Big Book podcast is look back about 1 year and see how the mega crew have aged, because we usually have fairly strong opinions when they come out. Oh, Command Up Psyche is going to be bad in the future, or you get someone like Barry Waddle, who we knew he would age well because of the great skill set and the variety of traits. So you name drop Doopler Emissary and the wonderful Richard Kind. So let's talk about him. Very similar to People Person Quark, who we just discussed, although kind of not so good in events, results in a lower tier. I want to say he was tier 2 when he first came out because of good, strong power on voyages and base. How has that aged? Frank, I want to start with you, who has a very wide complete roster, I guess fully complete roster. Once you get lucky with the Voyage exclusives, how has Doopler Emissary done for you on the very top end of performance?
Well, he did the reverse of his character, where he went from multiple copies down to 1. I did triplicate him upon his launch because of his skill set, because of his utility and his high voyage rank at debut, and he was used quite a bit. And over time, there have been comparable crew with other skill sets that have competed for those antimatter bonus seats. I'm down just to using 1 copy of him now. I have run him through Continuum Missions to try and boost him up a little bit. But he doesn't see as much as he used to. He's definitely down to a voyage every 2 or 3 weeks at this point.
Now, Dan, why don't you go ahead and play? Now, I know you are an elite player with immaculate taste and perception and crew evaluation potential. Go ahead and play the common man for us as we descend slowly from our ivory tower. As a 4 or 5 crew, we got in in a mega event. Very valuable statistically. So, say you threw your star on him. How is he looking now for a player who might only be collecting those those mega crew?
He's actually still one of my strongest Voyagers on my alt account, who is a VIP 0. He dropped randomly out of a pack. He did not. I did not get him from the mega that he dropped in, but I was able to finish him off through crew retrieval. He's my number 1 dip shuttler right now, and he still brings a ton of value to my roster. For being really kind of a little bit of an older and a mid-range crew, he brings a lot of value. A couple of notes though for some higher end players. So we recently got Paranoid O'Brien, a new purple, who actually shares a skill triplet with Doopler Emissary. So for Fleet Boss Battle, once Paranoid O'Brien enters the portal, there's the possibility that you're going to need one of these 2 unfrozen to be able to complete nodes. Also, he is the only crew in the game with a 100% attack rate for ship battles, and I have seen him at the top end of Arena on very specific types of builds where they can maximize their crit damage and just their basic attack damage for that 2 seconds that he lasts. So he's got some really interesting little niche uses here to really keep him relevant.
I would be remiss if I didn't mention that he is the best Doopler in the game.
You know, Jenos, that's 2 weeks in a row you made that joke. I don't think you'll be making Big Book episode 3. But as long as we're reusing jokes, the clone trait, we got to mention it because we mentioned it last week. That's like our thing now until WRG makes it a collection. A very small pool, and in a recent question and answer session, Joe did say that they're often looking to add value to crew on the lower end who don't have a lot of collections or maybe smaller pools like that. So with them previously flip-flopping between big and large collections, we just had the brutal one, so maybe they go small again in the near future with that. We'll certainly keep bringing it up until we will it into existence.
I also like his merchant trait. I think we had a merchant event maybe earlier this year or last year, and it was a very, very narrow trade pool. It would be really cool to see a merchant event or a merchant collection come through. One of those other cool little eclectic traits.
Well, now I gotta back up for a second, Dan, because this whole I don't go to 25,000 VP for my crew. I ethically source my gluten-free mega crew from packs only. Now, Jenos, you gave us nightmare mode. I think this should be the next evolution in gameplay. We only take crew from packs, no events, no giveaways. Now that would be a real challenge.
Wow.
What
do we call that?
We call that we buy the game another year of life.
A gluten-free mode, I think, would be the terminology.
We would need a whale to Frank volunteering your 8th account for that.
I'll start it up today.
So
Thanks,
speaking
bud.
of whales, I think we can all agree that the single best use of Doopler Emissary has been the one individual that put their money where their mouth was and made a full ship's bridge of 4 fully maxed Doopler Emissaries, and that was a flavor win.
So I think on behalf of the Big Book, we'll take a small L because after 1 year, he's still looking pretty good despite that very redundant skill set. But again, we're just talking about him on the heels of People Person Quark, who is a refresh in power. As an event crew, a little more accessible than maybe an exclusive or pack-only option. So, of course, we will see those printed more in the future, but if you do get this sort of crew 4 or 5, especially with the advent of Continuum Missions, it may not be the worst thing to add that 5th star.
I do have a new account I've already started that was going to do the gameplay in a very stupid way, but I might actually go this route.
Seriously, the pack only.
No.
I want to hear about the stupid way. Tell me what it is.
I was having a conversation with someone because I just keep telling people you need to set your expectations correctly. You cannot collect all the crew. So anybody who says, "Oh, I want to collect them all," I just want to say, stop it. Get help. You can't. Just play and enjoy it. You will never, ever, ever collect all the crew. And then I said, but wait a minute. Knowing what I know today versus what I knew 8 years ago, what if I started an account today or on a very special, right at an elusive treasure and a portal update and everything, and I knew I could use web store and I could use all this various stuff? How long would it take me to collect at least one copy, not immortalized, but at least one copy of all the crew in the game? And I figured it would take about 2.5, maybe 3 years total, and you could do it. but you would have to spend an unholy shitload because you would need a lot of crew slots, like stellar ice level. Don't put this in the pod.
Oh, it's going in the pod. Trust me. As long as there's no bleed through, as long as people aren't talking over each other, I'm just throwing it all in the pod. But it brings up a good point. There's sort of this tug of war between either you're spending or money or you're spending time, and those are kind of the two avenues to build up your roster. So, or some people are spending both. God bless them.
Well, you don't have to collect all the crew because all the crew are collected for you at bigbook.app.
That was Dan, that was your Don LaFontaine. Last time on Star Trek: The Next Generation. That was your voice from
Star Trek: The Next Generation.
I love the way you do that. So, on the back of Doopler Emissary, where we kind of try to give you the perspective of both, I want to pull back out again and talk about the big book overall. Who does it look to serve? We've been accused in the past many times of, you're too elitist, you're only looking at the top end. But, we have, I think, Dan, if we're going to count you as adding to the big book now that you've recorded some stuff with us, up to 12 players now over the years who've contributed to the big book, and almost all of them veteran players of 4, 5, 6 years. Some of us have been with us with the game since the very beginning. So it's advice that is aimed more toward the long term, that's true, but it's, if you're only playing for a short time and moving on, it really doesn't matter what choices you make. Play however you want, make the choices that give you the most pleasure short term, like Gath Laban might say. But the advice that we try to give aimed more toward long term thinking is stuff that, like you just pointed out, Frank, it may take you years and years to try to build that kind of collection. And so following the sort of advice that sort of economizes your play long term is what we strive to provide in the big book. I do want to shout out at the page bigbook.app/rating/overall. If you go down to the bottom, there's a little toggle button that says personalized score weights to calculate custom tiers. Now that sounds a little bit intimidating with all those large words. Basically what it lets you do is prioritize the aspects of the game that you want to prioritize. And I'm bringing that up now because that's a conversation we've had this week among the Big Book staff about, are we catering to the right kind of players with Continuum Missions coming up? We want to make sure that that's all in balance. So you can play with those sliders to your heart's content. It won't break anything. You can just reset it later. But we try to kind of collate that into weights that we feel are best for the new player, crew that you're going to want to cite to gain long-term value and potential in a variety of areas.
I like your point about economizing. It's the difference between going to Vegas and blowing $100 playing blackjack drunk without any care in the world to optimal play strategy, or taking the time to study your little wallet card ahead of time to know what your numbers for splits and
Dan, Frank is right
that.
here. You can't just insult him like that.
Yeah,
please.
I can't.
He put on pants for this podcast.
Wallet card. People study. People know what they're doing. No, you hand the man behind the table money.
Card.
He kicks you in the. He says, "Have a nice day," and you leave.
But I'm going to have to bleep that out later, won't I? See, this is what happens when you try to get too serious on a podcast dedicated to making as many hyperlink jokes as possible. But there you have
hyperlink jokes. How about bigbook.app/overalls where you can see Devor's picture?
Okay. Wow, that's actually not bad. I'll give you points on that one, Dan.
Wow.
See, now you've thrown me off. Let's just go to the next thing in the lineup, which is Timeless Chakotay, a.k.a. the Stay Puffed Marshmallow Man, a.k.a. the Baked Potato Chakotay. He's picking up all sorts of names, and you may not know what variant, what character he is just by looking at him, but he will be coming in the Honor Hall if he's not there already by the time you're listening to this. I think they probably pushed him back a little bit because of the Continuum Mission fiasco, but we swear he's coming, and that's the sort of leaks that you can only get on the Big Book podcast. So hold on, Dan, do me the Don LaFontaine. Give me a Big Book podcast.
The Big Book podcast.
All right, you're going to be we're going to pull your hit for the future and run that through. Obviously, a great Voyager for Chakotay, and that's kind of going to be what we focus on now. Completely unique skill order among Gold Crew on Voyages. About 2/3 of the top 100 antimatter rate crew have med in it because that is a much smaller pool, so the odds that they hit that trait are much higher. So very good antimatter hit rate for a crew that doesn't have med. 8 antimatter seats. I know I'm stealing all the metrics that you guys want to talk about, so someone tell me how good of a Voyager Chakotay will be.
Yeah, he's going to be fantastic. He's top in his triplet, obviously top in his skill order since it's a unique order. I'm not going to slam too many crew here, but his triplet is completely barren all the way down to EV Suit Hemmer in the 130s. Now, 130 is fine for most players. I'm just saying that there is nothing between him and Hemmer. He's not a fantastic event crew, even though he's got that big command base. Chakotay doesn't have a fantastic faction event rate, or pretty low overall count. He'll get variant events maybe once or twice a year, but when he does, that command base will pay, and some of those traits that he has that were mentioned, they'll eventually cash in. They just haven't yet.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned that because you pull down his event tab and you see traits like Federation and Desperate and Romantic getting events, and they were traits that we ragged on for years. Oh, way too big, they'll never get events, and now they are. So even though Chakotay is not necessarily a household name for events, and some of the traits don't look great, you never know what may hit. And so a top 10 command base certainly can play as one of the more common shuttle seats.
Yeah, speaking of traits, this guy has just a ton of really usable traits. Out of the 8 that he was given, which is above the average for crew nowadays, 6 of them are non-human Starfleet Federation, no civilian anywhere to be seen. A lot of good upside, particularly for his use in fleet boss battles for node solving. Some good combinations in there that'll help cover some of the crew, let you freeze them. Also for our new Continuum Mission feature, his base plus average proficiency roll puts him right up there. Not as high as Captain Tribble for your ultimate command node solving needs, but he's right up there, just below Chances Taken Kirk if you haven't received and fused him up yet. He is among peers with Commander Ransom in 6 of 10 with a really strong command roll to help you through some of the tougher nodes if you can get him fully fused and a little bit of Q experience on him.
Yeah, certainly we want to be equipping crew who you can use in other areas of the game. And so Captain Tribble doesn't necessarily need it like others do. Frank, I love having Mr. Whale on speed dial here. If we're ever going to give a green light to a crew, certainly the advice of someone who has all of them is Timeless Chakotay still going to play on your roster.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, for a long time, one of the big complaints people had in the game is bring value to the honor hall. Before Continuum Missions, why do I want Captain Tribble? He's one skill. Vox, the last edition, certainly a great value for ship battles, for fleet boss battles, maybe a little bit of voyaging on some people's rosters. But outside of that, or maybe K-less for a beginner's gauntlet card, still not a lot of killer cards in gauntlet like Mirror Chakotay was, or excuse me, Mirror Tuvok was in the faction store. They put a crew out there that was just top of the line Voyager, and you had to pay for it. This is the first entry outside of Vox where you can say this is what the honor hall should be. This crew will voyage on my roster probably until the end of the game, and if he makes it on all of my voyages, there's no reason he shouldn't make it on anyone else's voyages.
Well, I can't think of one reason, and that would be Quasimodo posed for the art, but beyond that, go ahead, Jenos.
Will you dupe him?
Yes, I have very specifically not been, and that's why I'm not participating in this event, because I don't know when he's going to drop in the honor hall, so I'm just not touching anything that'll give me a gold until he drops, so I can get him and do the double your crew.
That's why you're in last place.
Yes.
Yes.
See, yes. No, we just thought it's because you're terrible at the game, Frank. It turns out there's some kind of strategy involved in collecting crew. So the very friendly Big Book podcasts, at least part of us, some of us recommend that you dupe this crew. I think despite the terrible art concerns of a crew character who I hold near and dear to me, the voyage component alone is going to be worth the price of admission for a lot of players. He's not just, a strong Voyager. He's a strong Voyager with no peer in the skill order and a lot of antimatter seats. So he will certainly stay afloat much longer than Command Dip whatevers. So one last point of order before we move on. A shout out to Around the Campfire, who pointed out that Chakotay can be a critical component to a Negvar lineup in the Admiral Division of Arena. Negvar has a cloak at 4 seconds, so even on auto that will protect you from a lot of the crate and instant damage spam that comes very early. So you let that cloak activate at 4 seconds, and then at 8 seconds, which is where Chakotay comes online, hit all of your damage crew once theirs are depleted, and that is sort of an easy button way to win in Arena, and especially during objective events where you can't afford a stray crit that might destroy your win streak. So an option there, really kind of a niche case, but it's nice to have those crew in the game who might do what others can't. All right, let's go ahead and wrap things up. I promised Nifty I wasn't going to sing. Remy, who can I turn to? But this is a crew, a Tier 4 debut in Remy. Might be flying under the radar, but we got a lot to talk about, and you people are going to listen to it. Dan, you mentioned with Chakotay 6 viable good traits. Remy has 7. Also top 10 command base, a reasonable voyage power, even for a command dip, whatever. And even something interesting to talk about on ships. Dan, go ahead and kick us off with that cornucopia of traits.
Yeah, for a side character that was part of a minor plot point on Strange New Worlds, he's really bringing a good amount of different kinds of power to the game here. So these traits in particular really caught my attention. All of them are great, like you said, and on top of that, once he hits the portal, he's going to be unlocking a whole bunch of Orion nodes for Fleet Boss Battle that you're going to want to keep an eye on. He shares 2 different skill triplets with Orion Captain, one with Osira. So he's going to be an important crew to keep around on your roster, at the very least at 1 star, just so you can solve some of those difficult nodes once the next portal update happens with him in it. I think the collection upside is there. He starts with 3, and there's the potential for a couple more down the line as well. I like this. I like this character.
I did go ahead and listen back to the most recent Q&A from WRG, and although they said that doing all of the show collections isn't on their short-term plans, that may be something that they circle back around to and hit everything except individually animated shows, because they did kind of lump that into one. So we're looking at a ceiling of possibly 8 collections, which even in this day and age is pretty fantastic. And isn't it just a wonderful feeling to go ahead and forward think, collect a crew who ends up paying off later on? Frank, I'm going to hit that speed dial one more time. Let's assume that you didn't have every crew in the game, but you almost did. Would you be preparing for future collections by targeting these sort of esoteric traits like Chef or Interrogator? Is that on your radar when you see new crew?
Absolutely, because some of those are low threshold. Orion being a great example, because there's some terrible crew in Orion. And anytime that you have an opportunity to flesh out a collection with a not-so-terrible crew, you should try your best at it. Chef, I imagine, will be the same thing in the future as, Interrogator maybe won't be so bad. He isn't the greatest command dip suck out there, but he will still find use, I'm sure, for a lot of people. And he's handsome. He might be the worst pirate you've ever heard of, but you still have heard of him.
Yeah, so calling back to our last episode where we talked about compromised Cameron Gant, we talked about his unusual ship ability where he gave 15 accuracy with the position trigger, which, for a lot of people, do you really need that much accuracy? Well, guess what? Remy has the same damn thing. 15 accuracy with a position trigger activating at 10 seconds. My opinion, it's not all that super useful. You have other places you can get accuracy from, and a lot of times you can get that with a bunch of crit or some instant damage. 15 accuracy, are you really going to need that? I'm going to say no. So it's an interesting thing, but that's all it is. It's interesting. Not particularly useful in my opinion.
Hashtag shill, but I got to plug one more time the Big Book Plus subscription, because the facial reactions coming out of Frank have just been fantastic tonight. So you definitely want to see the video version of this podcast for the low cost of, I don't know, we haven't decided on a cost yet, but it'll certainly be more affordable than buying dilithium at store.StarTrekTimelines.com. Thank you for sponsoring this podcast, WRG.
Subscriptions are going to drop from a mixed behold. Keep an eye out.
That's right. I think that just about wraps up everything for the Big Book Podcast. Go ahead, Dan. Give me a...
Tonight on BigBook.app.
Thank you. The Big Book Podcast, Episode 2. Frank, Dan, Jenos, thank you for joining me. A lot more interesting crew this time around than week 1. So good luck, folks, in the Continuum Missions. May all of your bugs drop you free dilithium.
No more trouble in my body or my mind. Gonna live like a king.
All right, I'm here with Nifty Mittens. How many margaritas have we had so far?
I think 3 each.
3 each. That adds up to 9. Do you have anything to say to the beautiful people of the Big Book Podcast?
BigBook.app. It's your home for all things stats, all things true, all good advice, and the best notes on this side of the quadrant.